Hi, my name is Shelton and I'm a former Big Law attorney who's passed the New York and California bar. I'm doing a series where I walk through real bar exam essay questions starting with the July 2025 exam. My approach to answering any essay question is always the same. Before reading any fact pattern, I jump directly to the questions and jot them down. This way, I can create mini outlines under each sub-question and I can spot as many issues as possible as quickly as possible. I've already copied the questions here, so you don't have to watch that part. And by copying down the questions, I can automatically see this is going to be a contracts question. And so my brain is going into contract law attack mode. So what is the number one thing we ask on any contracts question? Which law applies? If this is a contract for the sale of goods, the UCC applies. If not, common law applies. Okay, so this is important for answering any contracts essay. If you write this paragraph at the top of your answer, you'll be guaranteed to rack up at least a few points every single time. Okay, so now let's read the first question. Did the exchange of emails create a contract? And again, before looking at the fact pattern, I'm thinking, what are the essential elements to form a contract? We need, and I'm going to write them down, offer, acceptance, consideration, no defenses to formation. And then if you have time, I also like to jot down a few thoughts or a definition for each of these points. So what is an offer? So we're looking for an objective intent to contract that creates the power of acceptance in the offeree. And then also definite terms. That's essential to any offer. Acceptance, that's a little simpler. We're just looking for an objective manifestation of assent to enter the contract. Okay, and then consideration, my favorite little phrase, a bargain for exchange. You know, for defenses of formation, that's a whole list of things, and so I typically won't write anything specific down, but just keeping that at the top of my brain. And while I might not hit every single one of these points, doing this up front sets me up for success. And if I run out of time, at least I'll have something on paper. So let's go to question 2. When Pete traveled to Debbie's house and said, I accept your offer, did that form a contract? Okay, so now before even reading the fact pattern, we know that there was probably some type of offer and an acceptance. So let's think of reasons why there's an offer and an acceptance, but we still don't have a valid contract. So now I'm just gonna quickly jot a few ideas down. Maybe there was no consideration. Maybe there was a defense to formation. For example, maybe the house that Pete was supposed to shovel blew up. Maybe something happened between the offer and acceptance, like the offer was terminated before Pete had a chance to accept it, or maybe someone died. I don't know, that's just a few ideas, and now we're ready to move to question 3. Assuming there is no contract, does Pete have a claim based on his reliance on Debbie's statement that she would pay a premium price if he cleared the snow from her driveway? Okay, so this question tells us exactly what it's looking for. Let's read it again. Does Pete have a claim based on his reliance on Debbie's statement? So, no contract was formed, but Pete still has a claim because he relied to his detriment on Debbie's promise. What does that sound like? Promissory estoppel. Let's write it down. Promissory estoppel. Bonus points if you can quickly write down the elements as well, which are a clear promise, reasonable, foreseeable reliance on such promise, actual reliance, and injustice if the promise isn't enforced. Okay, so let's read question 4. Assuming Pete has a valid claim, how much could he recover? We know that a contract has not been formed and that we're in promissory estoppel land. So what type of damages could Pete get? We're not looking at expectation damages because that requires a contract to have been formed. And, you know, with promissory estoppel, the typical damages are reliance damages. So we're looking for reliance damages. And I'm going to write that down. Reliance damages. And quickly jot down the definition. Reliance damages put the non-breaching party in the same position as if the contract had never been formed. Okay, great. Now I have a roadmap of attack and I'm ready to read the fact pattern. The best part about this approach is that not only do I have a roadmap, but if I run out of time, I have a bunch of points already on the board. Let's jump back up to question 1 and start reading the fact pattern. Did the emails create a contract? Okay, so I'm gonna begin at Debbie's first email in this email exchange. Hi Pete, can you come to my house and clear the snow from our driveway? I live at 10 Arbor Lane right here in town. what would you charge? And so the question we're going to ask, according to the outline we already wrote down, is this email an offer? And we've already written down the definition of offer. An offer is an objective intent to contract that creates the power of acceptance in the offeree, and it must contain definite terms. Using that definition and applying that to these facts, is Debbie's email an offer? It's clear that this is not an offer because it does not contain definite terms. Debbie asks Pete what price would he charge, and so this looks more like an invitation to negotiate than an offer. So I'm going to jot that down. Debbie's first email is not an offer. Common law requires definite terms, including price and quantity. Here, there's not a price term. Debbie is asking Pete what price he would charge, and so this looks more like an invitation to negotiate and is not an offer. Perfect, now let's read Pete's email. And remember, we don't have an offer yet, so we're still at step 1 of contract formation. Pete's email. I'm pretty busy today clearing snow for all my regular customers. I'm not sure I could get to you at all today, but if things go well, I could. I'm gonna underline that if I had a pen and paper, could be there around 4 p.m. I charge $300 for a normal sized driveway. So at first glance, this looks like an offer. We now have the missing price term, but what are we still missing? Do we have an objective intent to contract that creates the power of acceptance in the offeree? No, he says he could show up to shovel the snow, not that he will, and so this looks more like an illusory promise and not an intent to be bound by contract. Now we're going to read Debbie's next email, and remember that we're still at step 1 of contract formation. We still don't have an offer. Okay, so what does Debbie say? Well, I have a plane to catch tonight and I must leave the house by 5 p.m. I'm desperate. If you can get the snow cleared from my driveway before 5 p.m., I'll pay a premium price of $500. Now, this looks like an offer. Okay, so now I'm going to apply the rule we wrote at the beginning to the facts and rake up some more points. Debbie's second email is an offer because it contains definite terms and shows objective intent to enter a contract. Now that we have an offer, we are now looking for acceptance. So let's read Pete's next email with that in mind. Is Pete's email an acceptance? Pete, I will do my best, but I can't make any promises. Jumping back up to our definition that we wrote down, is this a clear manifestation of intent to accept the offer? No, this is not. So we're just going to apply that rule to the facts and write a simple sentence. Pete's email is not an acceptance. It does not contain a clear manifestation of assent to be bound to the offer. So we're done reading the email exchange and we have our conclusion to question 1. There is not a contract. And why is there not a contract? Because we don't have the essential elements: offer, acceptance, consideration. So I can just write that down in one sentence. Now I'm going to continue reading the fact pattern with question 2 in mind. Did Pete's I accept at the house create a contract? Okay. Pete worked hard and fast that day to finish clearing the snow for his regular customers. To further ensure that he got to Debbie's house in time to get to her driveway cleared by 5 p.m., he passed an opportunity to clear a parking lot for $400. I know we're not on question 3 yet, but I wrote down the elements of promissory estoppel, and this ringed a bell. This is Pete relying on Debbie's promise to his detriment. So I'm going to go down to question 3 and write this down. So where are my elements of promissory estoppel? Clear promise, receivable reliance, actual reliance. So I'm going to write this down. Pete worked extra hard and gave up a job worth $400 to clear Debbie's driveway. Okay, wonderful. Let's continue reading. He was able to finish all his work for his regular customers by 3:30, which left him plenty of time to get to Debbie's house and clear the driveway. However, when Pete arrived at Debbie's house at 4 p.m., he saw that the driveway had already been cleared. Okay, so as you can remember, for this question, we're looking for something that happened between the offer and acceptance that would make an offer plus acceptance not equal a contract. And here it is. When Pete arrived at Debbie's house, he saw that the driveway had already been cleared. One of the ways an offeror can revoke an offer is by 1, telling the offeree that they no longer wish to enter a contract before the offeree accepts the offer, but they don't have to verbally do this. They can do so by any type of action that the offeree finds out about that shows that the offeror no longer intends to enter the contract. And that's exactly what happened here. Okay, so applying to the facts. Before Pete was able to accept the offer, he saw that the driveway had already been shoveled. So he knew that someone else had already performed the tasks that he had agreed to do. Okay, so let's move on to question 3 and keep reading. Question 3 is, if no contract, can Pete recover anyway? This really could go either way, so all that matters is that you list the elements, apply the facts, and come to a conclusion. Let's start with the first element. Is there a clear promise? Yes. Debbie promised that if Pete could get the snow cleared by 5, she would pay him $500. Was it reasonably foreseeable to Debbie that Pete will rely on that promise? I would argue yes, because Pete said, I will do my best. Even though he said, I can't make any promises, it was foreseeable that he would rely on that promise and try to fulfill it. Now, do we have actual reliance? Yes, we already wrote that down. Pete worked extra hard and gave up a job worth $400 to clear Debbie's driveway. And finally, is there injustice if this promise isn't enforced? And yes, Pete relied on this promise to his detriment. Pete suffered a loss because of his reliance. So I would just write that down here. So our ultimate conclusion is that even though no contract was formed, Pete can recover under the theory of promissory estoppel as all 4 elements are met. Perfect. Now let's move on to question 4. We already wrote down that the typical recovery under the theory of promissory estoppel is reliance damages, and we've written down what reliance damages are. So now let's just apply those rules to the facts. How do we put Pete in the same position as he would have been as if this non-contract here had never been formed? Well, Pete gave up a job worth $400 in order to do Debbie's job. And so if this non-contract had never been formed, Pete would have done that other job and got $400. So his reliance damages are $400. If you have enough time, you could jot down that Pete would not receive $500 in damages, because that is the amount he would have received if he had been awarded expectation damages. But as we wrote at the beginning, expectation damages are only applicable if a contract has been formed. Well, that's all I have on this question. And if this was helpful, let me know and I'll make some more videos just like this. Good luck and happy studying.